You're watching Herald now. It's just gone 7 after 7. With nearly 88% of the vote counted, Labour's Peeni Henare has conceded the Tāmaki Makaurau a seat to Oriini Kaipara from Pāti Māori. Reports from the Labour camp describe a night of shock and upset, while Kaipara's after-party was one of jubilance. So, what does all this mean for next year's election? Māori Dunlop is Te Ao Māori political journalist with us this morning. Morena, good morning, Māori.
Morena, Ryan. Tina tātou.
Good to see you. And Julia Gable, the New Zealand Herald's political reporter, will be with us very shortly. Māori, what does this say about, what do you put the win down to? And the fact that, and I know it was a by-election and I know it's a Māori electorate, but only 3,000 votes roughly for Peeni.
Yeah, look, I think this is a lot of things. I think we already know by-election turnout is really low, but this was one of the lowest that we've seen. But it also kind of speaks to whether our voters are strategic, which Māori voters usually are. And I think, this is indicative of what Te Pāti Māori has been doing. And I think leading up to the voting, there was a question around whether or not the online campaign, the closely aligned Toitū campaign, the hikoi, was actually going to translate into votes and translate into turnout. And it did. I mean, although there's a massive absence in Labour's camp, obviously speaking to that apathy, and if everyone had turned out and voted, then it may have been a different outcome. But also potentially in that silence or potentially in that apathy, there was strategy. Peeni Henare was already in Parliament. People who wanted to get out to vote would have looked to Oriini as kind of the leadership and the new and that reanga, that generation of kind of kaupapa kids, kohanga kids, who are now stepping into these positions, and Māori really being clear under MMP that that's what they want and that's who they see themselves as in Parliament.
Hard job for Peeni, given that he was, basically a guy with a party with no policies going into this. Te Pāti Māori can say we've got GST off fruit and veggies, all that stuff. Labour has a policy of no policies right now, right?
Yeah, and the debate that we did, Te Ao Māori News and the Hui did with Peeni and Oriini, I think a week leading up to the voting, there was something I pushed Peeni on. I said, how can you campaign or expect people to show up and vote for you if you can't tell them what you're going to be campaigning on? And his defence was we always need to get it right and towing the party line. But then on the other side, Oriini got a bit of criticism for not knowing her policy. And not knowing enough policy, and leaps and bounds from when she first kind of announced standing, and then having to become from a journalist into the political realm. Although they might kind of seem similar, they're very different, as you know, Ryan. And so I think based on the policy wasn't what was going to win this by-election, I don't think. But it'll be really telling though going into the next election whether or not Peeni will stand again in Tāmaki. I mean, that's a second loss under his belt. He took it, and he was a statesman throughout the kind of the whole campaign as well. He's a very seasoned, very experienced politician, and so I expected him to go a bit harder on Oriini, especially in those debates. But that's not his style. He kind of went, just was a bit with grace and dignity. But whether or not that worked for him, the results say maybe potentially something different.
All right, Māori, joined by Julia Gable from the New Zealand Herald. We are talking about the Tāmaki Makaurau by-election and the result from the weekend, which saw Oriini Kaipara, well, you could say wipe the floor with Peeni Henare. Julia is with us this morning as well. Julia, good morning.
Good morning, Ryan.
Good to have you here. What did you make of the strategy from Te Pāti Māori with online, social media, big ground game, not so much knocking on doors, but doing it over socials? It seems to have worked.
It does seem to have worked. They've spoken, I think, directly to their people. I think the biggest difference was in the campaigns for the two. You had Labour that had an incredibly slick campaign, door-knocking, metronomic almost, consistent throughout there. And then you had a grassroots Oriini Kaipara. They did the same engagements, but although Labour's was slicker, Te Pāti Māori's was clearly more effective and had more cut through.
What do you put this win down to?
There's a lot of things. I don't think we know for sure, but I think it was never Oriini versus Peeni. It was Te Pāti Māori versus Labour. In saying that, Oriini brings a fresh face, perhaps a breath of fresh air for Māori at the moment. But I think it might just be a sign of the times, perhaps.
And a sign of things to come for Labour?
Perhaps. I don't know if we want to look too much into it in terms, we do have a general election just next year, but I think if anything it's an indication that Labour needs to look at their strategies for those Māori seats.
Yeah, because at the moment they've only got one, right, in Ikeroa Rāwhiti. Are they at risk of losing that too, do you think, or is that more of a stronghold for them?
I think it's too soon to say, and I don't know if we want to read too much into specific regions from this by-election. I just think overall, I'm sure that they will be going back to their drawing board and thinking about how much energy they want to put into those Māori seats, and if so, what strategy they're going to take.
All right. Julia, appreciate you coming in this morning for your analysis. Thank you very much. That is Julia Gable from the New Zealand Herald, political reporter. And joining us earlier was Māori Dunlop. Māori, thank you. Good to see you. Have a great day. Thanks for your analysis too. That is Māori Dunlop, who's Te Ao Māori political journalist. Time now is 14 minutes after 7. We will, of course, keep you updated throughout the